So, why study Richard Nixon? I mean, he resigned 46 years ago. He's long dead. You quarter of a century he's been gone now. You know, what relevance does he have? An interesting story, but why do this? Well, have you ever noticed that when there's a scandal, a national scandal, we tend to put the word gate after it? Uh, Remember when Bill Clinton affair with Monica Lewinsky uh, first came to the surface? It was called Monica Gate. There were some charges of Korean influence back in the 1990s, and it was called Korea Gate. Almost anything gets the word gate slapped on the end of it. I imagine we'll probably end up with a COVID-19 gate before this is all over. Watergate is in our bloodstream. That's part of whom we are as a nation. Um, Almost nobody knows what happened. Few people, actually at least two people still alive who participated in it. John Dean and Alexander Butterfield. I imagine John Dean was White House counsel, and Alexander Butterfield was head of communications. Um, Almost everybody's dead. And, I was a young man, very young man, when Watergate broke all over us. And in fact, I was just finishing college. Uh, and, and yet here we are. You know, gate, 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 every place, every scandal, gate. Richard Nixon, often charged with being this evil kind of guy. Nixon wasn't evil. In fact, you could argue that he had a fairly strong sense of ethics and morals and things such as that. But Nixon, in some ways, Nixon had every reason to believe that his successes would be taken away from him. He perhaps, and almost certainly, is the most bitter person we ever elected to the presidency. He believed, with reason, that the 1960 election had been stolen from him. He believed, with reason, that a traitor almost got away because Nixon was not handsome and was not graduated from, and did not graduate from, um, one of the top schools. And the man who was quite clearly a traitor and who we know to be such, um, almost got away because people who were rich and well educated couldn't believe that one of their own was a traitor. Nixon carried these wounds deeply. And, in politics, it pays to have a short memory. Um, you you have to forgive, and Nixon couldn't. He had, in some sense, been bullied as a youth. He'd had two brothers die terribly, grew up in poverty, and he was never seen as being quite right for anything. Um, Worked very hard. He lived at one point, and he was in Duke Law School, and Duke Law School is not a bad school to be, but he lived in an unheated shack because he didn't have enough money to actually, live in the kind of circumstances most Duke students would live in. When he graduated from Duke, um, number two from in his class, he couldn't get a job with the big law firms up in New York City. He should have. He certainly had the credentials, but he was clumsy and awkward, socially awkward, very. Um, physically difficult, clumsy. At one point, they used to find bottles, aspirin bottles, with the childproof caps chewed off of them around the White House. And the reason they did was because Nixon was too clumsy to open a childproof cap. And so he would chew the tops of these bottles off. Kind of ruins him. But he had a whole list of slights, and he never forgot them. He, and they ruined his life. They ruined his presidency, his paranoia, his fears, his guard, his attempts to protect himself. In many ways, he was a good man. Certainly a good family man, extremely good family man. Good to his friends, kind to adversaries, people who lost elections. And yet he did things which were, even today, after many years of teaching about Mr. Nixon, I find almost unbelievable. I'll detail them as we go through the lectures here on Nixon. But they're really tough to think that any U.S. president thought of some of the things that Nixon and his people thought of. They're not fascists, they're not communists, they're not Bolsheviks, they're not any of those things. They're just people who he surrounded themselves with amateurs who would do what he said. And then when the amateurs went out and did what he implied, not necessarily what he said, Nixon didn't have the courage to say, you know what, we screwed up. And so some really, truly awful things happened. We'll take a look at this complex and odd and unusual man over the next several classes, and look at the damage he did and try to understand, not that he was an evil man or that he was an unethical man or anything like that. Try to understand what happened inside him, but also inside the country. Watergate doesn't spring just from Richard Nixon. Watergate and all the horrors that are associated with it sprang from who we were as a country at that moment. And I think it's time, it will do us well to step back and say, do we really want to do that again? Well, I hope not. And I hope that the country will not come to that kind of situation again. I look forward to teaching about these topics. I don't know that Nixon is a specialty of mine, but I think anybody who specializes in the U.S. presidency inevitably specializes in Richard Nixon. Everybody take care out there. Stay healthy. And as I like to end these videos, I hope we all meet again sometime. Okay? Take care, everyone.